Greetings and welcome to the University of Minnesota Alumni Association's webinar series. My name is John Ruzek and I'm the Senior Director of Alumni Networks for the University of Minnesota. And I'm thankful for everyone who's here today and made time to join us live. Over 250 people have registered to learn a little bit more about graduate school options today, and we're so glad you have joined us live. Today's webinar is part of an ongoing free series being offered by the University of Minnesota Alumni Association, where we're having conversations with experts about career, life, and learning topics. Since we launched the series 18 months ago, we've had over 4,300 alumni and friends tune in live with us and nearly 9,000 YouTube views of our webinar library. And initiatives like this are made possible in part by our members, so thank you so much. And if you're interested in joining the Alumni Association, check us out at minnesotaalumni.org/join. The webinar is being recorded and will be viewable afterwards at our website, minnesotaalumni.org/webinars, and just give us a day or so to post it up on the website. And we will have additional webinars coming up featuring some wide-ranging and engaging topics from faculty and also some careers. So stay tuned for that. It'll be rolling out next month. Before we get started, I'd like to go over a few items so you know how to best participate in today's events. You have joined the presentation listening using your computer speaker system by default. If you'd prefer to listen over the telephone, just select telephone in the audio pane of the GoToWebinar panel and dial-in information will be displayed. If you experience audio difficulties while listening via your computer speakers, this is often caused by having multiple applications open, which can eat up your computer's bandwidth. So feel free to close any unnecessary applications or move to a hardwired connection versus a wireless. If you'd like to ask a question today, and questions will be welcome, you may submit them at any time. Please type in your questions in the questions pane on your GoToWebinar control panel. We'll be monitoring them along the way. Send them in as appropriate. And if you want to say hi, okay. Thank you. Someone is saying hi. Hello. We're trying a new mic, so I'm glad that this is broadcasting. So it's my pleasure today to introduce our three speakers, all from the University of Minnesota. The first is Jim Rowan. He is the Assistant Director of Admissions at the Graduate School for the University of Minnesota. The second is Dr. Niru Andrea Nanalina, and she is the Director of Academic and Professional Development for the Office for Diversity and Graduate Education at the University of Minnesota. And last but not least, Lynn Gillis, Director of Admissions and Recruiting for the full-time and part-time MBA programs at the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota. I am so glad that each of them is sharing their time with us today, and we'll get it kicked off. And I will now hand it over to Niru to kick off Is Grad School Right for Me? Welcome.
Thank you, John, and welcome to all of our listeners. So we're very excited and pleased that you're able to join us today for a wonderful topic. We're going to start with the agenda, which is why graduate school. We're going to have an overview of program types, and we'll talk about is it worth pursuing a graduate degree. We'll also talk about researching and financing graduate school, followed by admissions process and evaluation criteria. And then we will leave some time at the end for Q&A from you.
And again, this is Jim Rowan, and I'd like to also say welcome to all of you and thank you for joining us. So why is it that students go on to this next big step? Why graduate school? Well, first off, you might be asking, what are my career objectives? Is this degree going to be valued in or for entry-level positions, middle to senior management positions? Am I doing this for career advancement, perhaps looking at obtaining a higher salary, or some type of a transition or starting your own venture? Well, I think when some students are looking at graduate level studies, one of the first things that they'll be looking at is that they'll be doing a much more specialized study of their field. If you think about your undergraduate degree, oftentimes the major that you complete is perhaps less than half of what you do. But at the graduate level, you really are specializing in that major field. Some students are looking at completing internships and getting some real hands-on experience while they're doing their graduate studies. And I think with the MBA, pretty much all of their students are doing an internship. Some students are also looking at doing further research, really digging deep into their field of study. Really, if you are comparing your undergraduate study to graduate level studies, most students would tell you their experience with their advisor mentoring is really kind of this intense relationship where you're continually working with your advisor and bouncing ideas off back and forth off of each other. Global education, the University of Minnesota tracks applications for students from all over the world. Our office, Graduate Admissions, receives about 18,000 applications a year, and just about half of those applications come from international students from all over the globe. Now, those are applications. By the time students are admitted and choose to enroll, the number comes down to about 20% of the incoming class might be an international student population. But the idea is that you will be in classroom with students from all over the world, exchanging ideas, exchanging ways of learning from each other, and building on future collaborations. Many students are looking at this next step for future employment. Perhaps it's a requirement that you need to do. You have to get this next degree as part of some type of a licensure for your career. Earning potential. I think a lot of students are looking at just taking that next jump in their salary. A little bit of a description of how these degrees are set up. The research degrees, the MA and the MS master's degrees, are typically about 2 years of full-time study. Now, there are definitely examples of accelerated programs. One in the Carlson School of Management, Business Analytics, that's becoming popular, is a 12-month accelerated program that you go through. But with the research Master of Arts, Master of Science degrees, it's typically about 2 years, requires a thesis and a defense or some type of comprehensive examination as you go through this degree. And we often talk about at the master's level that you are still taking knowledge in. You are doing research into your field of study, but you are still learning about it. You're taking knowledge in. The PhD degree, usually 4 to 6 years, I think on average about 5.5 years. This will require a written and oral examination, a dissertation, and a defense of that dissertation at the end, giving knowledge back. This is where you are contributing to that body of knowledge in your field. There's also many, at a comprehensive university like the University of Minnesota, there's a lot of professional programs, the medical school, MDs, law school for JDs, dental school, DDS, veterinary medicine. The Masters of Business Administration is considered a professional degree, Masters of Public Health. These are often very specific skills and training, maybe some hands-on work that's going to be required, and these can sometimes be longer than the research degrees. That can vary, but tuition will sometimes be higher with the professional degrees. In addition to this, we have post-baccalaureate certificate programs, which would typically be about 1 year in length. Full-time study at the graduate level on average would be 6 credits per semester for minimum, but students might be completing about 15 credits per year and a minimum of 30 credits for master's degrees. The post-baccalaureate certificates might be about 15, 16 credits. I wanted to just mention quickly about the dissertation and the defense of the dissertation. That might be kind of intimidating for some students, but really, if you ever have an opportunity, these are usually open to the public. Departments will promote dissertation and a defense of a dissertation, and that graduate student is up in front of their faculty committee, interested students, students from the department, family members, presenting in a classroom setting this work that they've been doing for years, and then getting questions from the faculty committee. They step out of the room, the committee confers, and the student steps back in and congratulations, doctor, you've been awarded your degree. Now, it could sound intimidating, but really I mentioned earlier that advisor-advisee relationship, and really it's the role of that advisor to make sure that you do not get to that point unless you're ready to go. And it is unusual for students not to pass once they've reached that point. Now, Nuru can speak from experience here, and perhaps maybe you could relate if I'm portraying this accurately.
Yes, thank you, Jim. Yeah, the word defense is actually a pretty harsh word, and those of us who work with graduate students don't like to use it, but it is the official word for that time when you have written this great body of knowledge that's supposed to fill a gap in the research area. And that is actually the time for the student to shine. This is the work that you've done for the last 3 or 4 years. You are the expert on your research. Although your advisor might be an expert in a larger area, you're the one who conducted that research. And so it's a wonderful opportunity to share what you've learned. It is expected that doctoral students will be publishing their work. So a lot of what we do is work with students to make sure that they can take parts of the dissertation and turn that into publishable articles or maybe even a book.
So I guess you have to ask, is this going to be worth it? Well, really, the statistics over years have shown that for both unemployment rates and average salaries, the higher levels of education that you have are going to lead to higher salaries and lower unemployment. This chart that we have up here is from the Bureau of Labor Statistics 2013 data. I actually didn't put the new slide in, but there is newer data out there on the Bureau of Labor Statistics website, and the news is even better than it was back here a couple of years ago. Sometimes when students are thinking about completing a doctoral degree, a PhD, the idea is this is for academia. This is for becoming a faculty member, working at a university. But I really do, we do like to emphasize how completing a PhD has a lot of value in many different areas. Perhaps Nuru could mention some experience with this as well.
Absolutely. So if you are thinking about a PhD, if you're interested in pursuing that degree, just know that a lot of students have used their degrees in other sectors besides academia. So for instance, industry, you can be senior researcher at biomedical company. You can work for nonprofits as executive director. We have students who have been curators at museums. So there are many other options. You don't have to be a tenured faculty at university, although students do choose to do that. So there are many options.
So, and going on to the next slide, graduate program case example for MBA. Lynn?
Thanks, Jim. So as Jim mentioned, MBA program is a professional program. It's one of the, there are actually a number of professional programs at the University of Minnesota. So what I hope to do is just use an MBA degree as an example or a case study, just to dive a little bit more deeply into how you can assess whether a graduate program is going to be worth it. And there are many different ways in which you can do this. So from a variety of different aspects, whether or not it provides value to you professionally, personally, but in addition to your return on investment. So as Jim had mentioned from a previous slide, just what you can expect in terms of your pay in comparison to a bachelor's degree. So just starting out first, with an MBA degree, the Graduate Management Admission Council, they are the administrator for the GMAT, which is an exam that students would typically take prior to entering into a business school. They conduct an annual survey of students who are about to graduate their MBA program experience. And year over year, as they're doing the survey, they come across a lot of great data that would basically testify to the value of an MBA degree or a graduate degree program. And they actually assess this across multiple graduate management programs across the United States and worldwide. About 3,000 to 4,000 students participate in the survey from over 140 different countries. So it is really rich data, and it's great data for students or somebody who's thinking about a graduate program to really examine into to see whether or not it could affirm some of their reasons for wanting to pursue a degree. And again, here are just some quick points for what students in this last year's survey indicated were some of the benefits for them in pursuing their graduate program at a business school. And we find that this is true across multiple program formats. So specifically for the MBA program, we offer, or many schools will offer that program as a full-time program. Students can also pursue it as a part-time distance or online MBA program. There's also something called an executive MBA program format, which typically is more catered towards somebody who has extensive work experience. For our program at the Carlson School of Management at the University of Minnesota, our students are typically coming in with about 14 or 15 years of full-time work experience. And we also have qualitative master's or specialized master's degree programs. So Jim had mentioned the business analytics program that we offer at the Carlson School of Management. We're also launching a new one-year master's of finance and also another master's in supply chain. And we also have something called an industry MBA that's more specifically targeted to students who have Hill experience in DC. So across these different programs and formats, what GMAC has been able to find is that students find relative and pretty consistent satisfaction levels across varying aspects of professional and personal benefits. And again, we see this across multiple program formats. So the degree in itself, regardless of the format that you're pursuing or the structure that you're pursuing, does certainly assist students in their development goals. Now, one of the concrete ways in which you can also measure whether or not an MBA program or a graduate degree program is going to be worth it is by looking what the expected salaries would be after graduation. And again, we do this in comparison to a bachelor's degree. Most graduate studies programs will have a prerequisite or a requirement for students to have an undergraduate degree prior to coming into the graduate degree program. So this is based on another survey that GMAC conducts called the Corporate Recruiter Survey. And what they do is they survey corporate recruiters, so employers who are expecting to hire MBA graduates, and what their expected starting salary would be for those students. Oftentimes, these are median starting salaries that exclude the inclusion of bonuses. So for the MBA program for this last year, so for 2015, they conduct this survey with each graduating class. So 2016 is not yet obviously available, but for 2015, for the most recent graduating class, the expected starting salary was $100,000, which is nearly double the expected median starting salary for bachelor's degree candidates, which is about 82% as a premium in comparison to a bachelor's degree. It's also really great news. So again, the corporate management or the corporate recruiter surveys, so in comparison to students, what they're doing is they're surveying all of these employers who are expecting to hire undergraduate and graduate students. And for this most recent survey, they had, let's see here, they had about 530 different companies, which represented 842 employers. And this was from a worldwide survey, so more than 40 different countries worldwide were represented. So you can see that, there were broader economic challenges that influenced or impacted hiring in 2008, 9, 10, and even moving into 2011. But since then, we've really seen the hiring landscape increase quite a bit for our MBA graduates. And we hit a 9-year high for this last year. And just looking at our current employment statistics for our most recent graduating class for the MBA program, just comparing that from last year's statistics, specifically for the Carlson School, our numbers are also up right now, very strong, both for our internships, 100% for our students this last year for our first-year students going into their internships over the summer, which is what they're in right now. But then, of course, with our graduating students as well, those numbers are better than last year's numbers. So we feel that this is a really great indication that the landscape is continuing to improve for graduate management education and employment overall across the United States and globally. So beyond just hiring and salary, another way in which candidates will oftentimes assess the value of a graduate degree is just determining what does that look like in terms of your professional brand and how you represent yourself across your resume. So what differentiates you against other candidates, against other employers who are looking for a position? When GMAC surveyed the corporate recruiters, we find that job function, industry, and years of work experience, as what many people would expect, do continue to lead in terms of ways to differentiate yourself against other candidates. But the fourth most important way to differentiate yourself was really looking at the graduate degree area of study. And I think a lot of this really attests to what Jim had mentioned earlier, is that beyond your bachelor's degree program, a graduate degree allows you to truly hone in and specialize on a specific skill set that can oftentimes make you more competitive and more capable for moving into certain professional areas.
So, how do I choose a program that fits? Well, you know, we here today really hope that you will take a strong look at the programs at the University of Minnesota, but we also understand and realize you'll be looking at institutions maybe near and far, and we do hope that the information we're providing you today translates no matter where you might be looking to go on your next step of education. But the one thing that you should really be looking at first off is the faculty of the program that you're looking at. Quality faculty equal quality programs. And it is really pretty easy to try to get information about individual departments and which faculty there are responsible for graduate level education, what their interests are, what they're doing research in, what their publications are about. And perhaps you can arrange to do a informational interview. As you're trying to find, is this the right program for you? You could meet with a faculty member here to describe what it is that you're looking for. And they may help you say, yes, this is a good fit, or, well, perhaps not, but we do know of this other program that you might be interested in that sounds like a good fit. Now, a little bit about the typical structure of graduate education within departments. There's usually one faculty member that is described as the Director of Graduate Studies, and that might be a long-term person or perhaps a position that rotates every 3 years. But then there's also staff members that have responsibilities for admissions and student services within that department. More often not faculty members, but they do work with the day-to-day admissions processes. And these staff people can be a great source of information. There's a later slide towards the end here where we show you how you can find out who these people are within the different graduate programs. So you can ask faculty or staff if there's any suggestions they have as you're preparing your application, things to try to avoid, but also talk to current students. Very often the graduate programs will have a list of their current graduate students and what they're doing research in, and just as often they'll have lists of recent graduates and what they are doing now. So perhaps reaching out to current students or recent grads, again, maybe an informational interview to ask them, hey, if you had this to do over again, would you do it? And do you have any tips about applying for admission? Then you have to consider the costs and the location. Can you afford to live where that graduate program is? Not just the tuition itself, but obviously expenses are going to be different depending on where you're located. Now, we do try to be as transparent as possible within the graduate admissions. We have data, and again, I'll direct you to this, how to find this later on, but we have data that goes back 10 years for each of our graduate programs that shows how many students have applied for admission, how many have been admitted, how many have enrolled, how many have graduated. So it's easy to find that first step information on really how difficult is it going to be to apply for admission to this program. Now, this might seem like an obvious thing to state, but you should take a close look at the courses that are being offered within that department, not just the name of the major, but the courses to find out, okay, are they aligned with what I'm looking for in a graduate program? Visit if possible and take a look at the facilities. Are they the type of facilities that you would expect from a top-notch graduate program? You perhaps can get information on what are the average test scores for students admitted to this graduate program, and what type of help are they giving students once they graduate? What are the opportunities that I'm going to have once I get closer to the end here? Often, I think in the past, sometimes grad programs left it up to students to find their own way as they were completing graduate programs, but more and more graduate programs are being held accountable for placement of their graduate students, not admitting too many students in certain fields, and providing career services and career counseling for their graduate students. Of course, you'll probably want to be taking a look at rankings, but just a word about that. Maybe kind of the obvious thing that you would state here is you can't look at the rankings of an institution to determine if this is a good graduate program, really. You really need to find out what is the ranking of that department within the, and compared to other graduate programs across the country. There's a lot of the ways that maybe we all hear about, U.S. News and World Report, Princeton Review, that will do these types of ranking. There's one maybe lesser known ranking services. The National Research Council does do a rating of graduate departments, which compares the departments within institutions. And that might be a good place to take a look at if you're interested in finding out about rankings.
So one of the ways in which to wrap up a lot of the just the different sources and ways in which you can assess your program is that you really want to evaluate the whole experience. So thinking about a graduate program certainly is going to be an important decision, and it's a huge investment both on your finances and on your time. And there's a lot of implications, of course, even personally. So when you're thinking about whether or not this is the right step, you do really want to do some due diligence and evaluate the entire experience. So taking time to talk to faculty, taking time to do the research, connecting with students or alumni of the program, and really you're assessing across the board on whether or not this is going to provide you new knowledge and experiences, will equip you with the right tools that you need in order to make your next step, whether that is going to be academically or professional. And then, of course, just how does that expand your relationship and the network that you're able to establish within the program?
And I'm sure you've all have concerns about paying for graduate school. You know, the funding for graduate students is complicated. And of course, you will be able to fill out the FAFSA form and find out if there's loans that you're eligible for. But hopefully that'll be kind of a last resort. There are a lot of different ways that graduate students fund their education, including fellowships, which are really scholarships, where students are, these can be very competitive, where students, if they're awarded a fellowship, they typically do not have any type of a work responsibility within that department, but they will be awarded a salary or a stipend and have their tuition and a lot of their fees and health insurance costs covered by that department, so that they really can concentrate on their studies and they don't have to worry about outside sources of funding. Graduate assistantships is a way that an institution like the University of Minnesota will fund a lot of their graduate students. Teaching assistants or research assistants, these are a little bit more common in PhD programs, but we do see these awarded to master's students as well. And again, this will waive the tuition requirement that you would have, cover most of your health care, pay you a salary typically for about 20 hours of work per week, which is considered a 50% appointment. You could have a salary anywhere from $15,000 to up to $30,000, depending on field of study. And there is a graduate assistance office that will help students with these things. And then, of course, there's a lot of on-campus employment as well. Nora, do you have any interest or any knowledge about certain fellowships that students should be thinking about?
Sure. So fellowships are offered at different levels. There are central fellowships administered by central offices. So, for example, our Office for Diversity and Graduate Education, we have a fellowship called the DOVE. That stands for Diversity of Views and Experiences Fellowship. And for that, it's open to all graduate students. You do have to be nominated by your graduate program. So the Director of Graduate Studies, Jim mentioned earlier, this is the faculty who sort of coordinates everything related to graduate education for that department. That faculty would seek students to be nominated for the DOVE Fellowship. And there are also fellowships at the collegiate level. So the college would have some funding to bring in students, and there are also fellowships at the graduate program level, so central, collegiate, and program level. You definitely should ask the program you're going into if they have fellowships for which you can apply, if they would nominate you for fellowships that they're aware of and that you're interested in. So definitely ask about that.
One thing that I will want to mention specifically for the Carlson School of Management, and this also addresses a little bit about, or addresses one of the questions that has been posed by one of our listeners. So at the Carlson School, we really do value students who are coming back in from the University of Minnesota who have graduated from the U. So we do have a returning University of Minnesota alumni scholarship that has been donated by one of our, or actually a couple of our alumni from the Carlson School and at the University of Minnesota. So due to the generosity of these benefactors, they specifically earmarked these scholarship dollars for returning University of Minnesota alumni across all of the different campuses and satellite campuses for the University of Minnesota. So it's a great opportunity for students who are coming from the university already with a degree from here to consider the Carlson School. And in terms of just thinking about what does that look like, if you do graduate from your undergraduate institution or going back to your alma mater, for us, we value and we understand the quality of the education that's provided here at the University of Minnesota. So oftentimes this is a great asset to the university and for our Carlson School MBA program. So while scholarships and fellowships are great, and it is very important for all candidates who are thinking about graduate schools to explore scholarship opportunities with any of the programs that they're considering, it is a realistic expectation to think of what your own expenses are going to be like and what will your investment be for your graduate studies program. So I just wanted to break it down a little bit more from a step-by-step perspective and just thinking about how do you really assess and think about how can you afford graduate studies program, because oftentimes this is one of the greatest concerns we will hear from our students who are thinking about applying to our programs. First thing, really just thinking about across the board, look at the program, what are the actual tuition and fees? And just realize that this is often represented as a fixed expense. Depending on the program, they may represent it as a semesterly cost or an annual cost, but most programs would typically indicate this on their website. Or you can also typically find it by contacting the program office. It's information that we simply do not try to hide from students. We know, again, that this is a major investment that candidates and students are taking on. And so we want students to be well aware of what that investment may look like. So these pieces of information are readily available to candidates, whether they're asking for it or by directly going onto the website. But beyond tuition and fees, so tuition will be the cost of the education itself. Fees are things like a university fee. At the University of Minnesota, we require students to have health insurance, for instance, so that's also built in as a fee for the program. But then the additional educationally related fees, oftentimes books and supplies. And again, this will vary from school to school and program to program on how they're listed, but oftentimes schools can provide an estimate for what the cost of books and supplies will be for the program. Depending on the format of the program, you may be looking at room and board. So if you're pursuing a full-time MBA program, for instance, within our MBA program, we will provide with an estimated cost of living on an annual basis to pursue the full-time MBA program in Minneapolis. And just know that room and board will vary because living costs will vary from city to city. So your expenses for pursuing a degree program in New York will be very different if you're pursuing a degree program in Denver. And then, of course, there's going to be additional expenses. So for the MBA program, Jim had mentioned that our MBA students do an internship between years 1 and 2. So there may be extra expenses related to your job search, interviewing, flying to a new location, although sometimes that can be supported by the program or also supported by the employer who's considering you as a candidate. Just know that there may be opportunities for you to look at some of these job search opportunities where they may incur additional expenses as well. Okay, so when you think about what the overall cost of an MBA program or a graduate program is going to be, you really want to compare that against your currently existing resources. So again, assume that you're planning on taking the full cost of education, so then that way you can be well prepared if you are not going to receive a scholarship or a fellowship. So then look at the overall cost of the program and for the length and duration of that program, and compare that against your own personal savings. If you are planning on working while pursuing your program, do look into employer assistance and whether or not they offer tuition reimbursement for your program. This can be a pretty common opportunity that employers or employees will have access to. What we typically find for our area companies here within Minnesota is that oftentimes employee assistance will be right at the tax level, which is $5,250 per year, so $5,520 per year. Of course, private scholarships, so beyond what may be offered at the school, there are additional resources that you can look into to pursue fellowships or scholarships for your studies, along with individual scholarships that are awarded at the school. So once you look at all of these different sources to fund your educational program, you'll then want to think about how much does that, how much of that can be subtracted from the overall cost of the program. So then you will be able to make a determination for what the remaining expenses you need to pay out of pocket. And then, of course, the other next step would be just to look into your student loans opportunities. So as you're looking into applying to a graduate school program, much just like what you did for undergraduate studies. You will want to submit a free application for federal student aid. Know that your credit may influence your interest rate. So there are things that you can do, especially if this is a long-term exploration, that you can start doing now to try to influence your credit. And then also you can determine what your monthly payments would look like by using the cost of education along with subtracting some of those other sources of funding by utilizing a financial aid calculator that's online.
So a little bit about the timeline here. You, of course, want to give yourself plenty of time to get ready for these graduate programs. And ideally, you are probably looking at about an 18-month from beginning to enrollment. Perhaps in the spring of 2017 is when you would start preparing for a graduate program for the fall of 2018.
Keep going.
And ideally, in that 18 months, you might first be visiting different locations.
Okay.
So we might have lost some audio here. So I'm going to start again that what you're looking at is about an 18-month period of time to prepare for your graduate studies. At the beginning, you might be visiting different campuses, trying to narrow down your choices on the institutions that you're going to apply for. And for enrollment in the fall, typically you are applying for admission just about 9 to 12 months ahead of time. There's a lot of variation in deadlines, so you have to check that out ahead of time so you know what the deadline is for your graduate program. But for fall enrollment, those deadlines will often be in the winter. Perhaps December 1st, January 1st, something along those lines. And in some cases, there'll be two deadlines where they'll have one deadline where you are considered for admission and funding, and then a final deadline where they'll consider you up until a later point for admission, but no longer for funding. So be aware of those earlier deadline dates. You can usually get started with your application for admission months before it has to be submitted, so you can build on that as it goes along. So you visited campuses, you've narrowed your choices down, you're applying for admission in perhaps September, October, November for the following year. And then typically the admissions committees will meet in midwinter and are making admission decisions in January, notifying you February, March, and then you have some time as the institutions you've applied to are coming back with admission decisions. You have some time to make your decision. There is a nationally agreed upon date of April 15th if you have been offered funding, that no institution should require you to make your decision on where you're enrolling until April 15th when you've had time to consider all your options. So that would be the typical timeline for enrollment beginning in September. But as I say, there's a lot of variation on this. Some programs will admit for spring semester, some in the summer, and you just have to be aware of what the deadlines are for these things. Completing your application, there's going to be some common elements that you're going to have to submit really just about any application. And obviously this is the online application and transcripts. In many cases you'll be starting with electronic versions of your transcripts that you'll upload directly into the application. And typically for most graduate programs you're going to need letters of recommendation, perhaps 3, and at least 1 applicant statement. So that would be something you can really count on for most graduate programs. In addition to this, you may have a test that you're going to have to complete, such as the GRE, Graduate Record Examination, or the GMAT, Graduate Management Admissions Test, the LSAT, the Law School Admissions Test, the MCAT, Medical College Admissions Test. So just be aware of that. Some programs may not require a test at all. You want to check that out ahead of time. There'll very often be some type of an interview, perhaps a phone or in-person interview or a Skyped interview that you're going to take part of. And then most students are submitting some type of a resume or a background of what they've been involved in, perhaps even a portfolio. And in some areas, you might have an audition that you're required to do as part of your admission process. Now, we hear typically that students might be applying to anywhere from 6 to 9 different graduate programs. There's a lot of variation on that, and it depends on the individual, but often that's what the case will be. The students will be applying to more than one institution. And if you think about it this way, you might be wanting to look at perhaps 2 or 3 graduate programs that you would call reach programs. These are programs that you know are really, really good, really, really competitive, and you would like to have that opportunity to go there if you are admitted. So you're going to try to get into a couple of tough programs, a couple of reach programs. Then maybe there's a couple of programs where you've looked at the average test scores, you know what your test scores are, and you think, you know what, this matches up pretty good with what my background is. So perhaps you apply to 2 or 3 match programs. And then perhaps there's a couple of other programs that perhaps don't have the reputation that you're looking for, but you know that maybe they'll be perhaps something you can afford. And so you apply to a couple of what you might call safety programs. This is what we hear from different students, and so like I say, anywhere from 6 to 9 different graduate programs. But while you're doing this, you want to be really careful that you're reviewing directions, proofreading your statements, making sure that you're submitting the right statement with the right application, that you are aware of all the deadlines. And I think the advice that you'll hear, especially from people that work in admissions offices, is we like it when you apply early, well before the deadline. This chart will show you just the flow of applications into our office. You can see for us, we are beginning to get a lot of applications in November and December, and really then it drops off once you get to February. So a lot coming into our office at one time, and if you can apply a little bit earlier, it gives admissions officers an opportunity to make sure that they've got your test scores matched up, that you have time to get letters of recommendation in. So perhaps it's human nature to wait till the last minute, but in admissions processes, it's really good to try to get a head start. Now, so what are programs considering when you apply for admission? The word that you'll hear in admission circles a lot is that there is a holistic review of your application for admission. It's not just one thing that's going to make it or break it for you, but there's a lot of information that committees are looking at when they make these admission decisions. Often they'll be stating things like they're looking at a 3.0 GPA, and perhaps they will admit students with below a 3.0 GPA, or in some cases that would be unrealistic and you're going to have a 3.5 or higher. So there's a lot of variation in that, but you know, typically they'll tell you that they're looking at for students with at least a 3.0 GPA. And if you don't have that GPA, then perhaps you have some of these other things that are listed on the slide, such as consistent improvement. You've challenged yourself each year as you've gone through your undergraduate study. You've had experience with undergraduate research or done some independent study, been involved in things like honors programs, have professional experience. Maybe you speak multiple languages. If you have an opportunity to do some type of graduate coursework ahead of time, this can help in a couple of different ways, showing the graduate admissions committees that you can do this level of work, but also you get a taste of what it's like to be in that department at a graduate level course. And it can also lead to things like making contacts with faculty members that perhaps would write a letter of recommendation for you, encourage your application, meeting other graduate students that can give you advice on processes. The requirements really do vary quite a bit by graduate programs, but these would just be some typical considerations when you're applying for admission. So a big part of being considered for admission is that applicant statement. I have had faculty members tell me that really that's one of the first things that they'll go to when they're reviewing applications, just to try to get a sense on, is this person going to be a good fit with our graduate programs? So of course you want to do things like stating your accomplishments, but not just your accomplishments, not just a list of them. How do these relate to what you want to do? What is it that you see yourself doing, and how has what you've done so far leading up to that? If you have been working with certain faculty members, mention that and you know, tailor that to that specific graduate program or faculty member. This is not just your ability to demonstrate your writing ability, but also your chance to show your passion for this field of study. A lot of graduate programs will ask you to address specific questions with your applicant statement, so you want to be careful that you're following those instructions. If they say give us 1 to 3 pages, you better not submit 5 or 6, because your best stuff might be on page 5 and 6 and nobody has read past page 3. Include any publications, research awards, professional experience you have. We do have an online tutorial that you might find helpful. Nuru helps a lot of students with applicant statements. Is there something that you'd like to add to this, Nuru?
Yeah, so like Jim said, it really is about fit. Will you bring experiences and knowledge to the field? Will you gain from that program that will be a good fit? So you really need to be specific as to why you're interested in that program, and bring all of the information that's relevant to that program. If you're not a good fit, if you're saying things that doesn't really relate to getting a degree in that area, then they would consider that you are not really sure about what the coursework and what that program entails, and that might affect you negatively in the decision.
I think one thing that can cause students some anxiety is the letters of recommendation. Often you are waiving your right to be able to review what is being written in that recommendation. And you want to choose carefully, not just asking someone if they can write a letter for you, but can they write a good, positive letter for you? We get asked a lot, is it better to have faculty submit letters of recommendation? Could you have a supervisor submit that? You might get a different answer from Lynn for MBA programs than you would get from a PhD research program. I think for a lot of the research degrees, faculty do certainly like to hear from other faculty. They know each other. These are small circles they travel in, and they know each other's reputations. But your recommendation provider should know your accomplishments and your goals. Perhaps provide a copy of your applicant statement to the recommendation provider so they know what it is that you're planning to do. Include specifics about what you had been involved in that faculty member's class, your rank, what you were writing your papers on, what kind of grades you received. Perhaps if you have to submit 3 letters, you want to arrange for 1 extra letter. I know that very often as we get down to deadline time, this is a type of thing where students are often contacting us that they just can't get that last person to submit the letter. What kind of advice do we have? So try to plan ahead for that. Remember to say thank you to your letter writers and stay in touch. You might need to call on them again down the line for fellowship applications and other reasons that that you would hope that they'd write a letter supporting you. Nuru, I know you have done a lot of writing of letters. Any advice on this topic?
Yeah, so one thing, in addition to giving your recommender your packet of materials that you're submitting, I would also tell them if there's anything in particular you want them to mention about you. So I ask my students, is there anything that you would really want me to highlight for this particular application? And then make sure that they give me a lot of evidence or descriptions of, why they think that should be mentioned in the letter. So just anything to help your recommender be very specific about your skills, your experiences, that will make you a strong candidate.
Okay, so you've submitted your information, and the admission decisions have come in. Most of the decisions you would have heard before mid-April. And what do you do if your application is turned down? Well, I think it really would be a mistake to just accept that without trying to gather more information. You really do want to contact that graduate program to find out what are some reasons why you weren't admitted, and is there anything that you can do about it? Could you reapply? Is there something you can change? And sometimes you will find out that it could be as simple as resources within that department where they don't have room to assign you to an advisor at this time, but they would encourage you to apply again for a future term, or perhaps something mechanical, like you were missing 1 prerequisite course that you can complete and then try reapplying again. Maybe they would like you to gain some further work experience, other types of experiences, perhaps retake tests. And if they do not encourage you to reapply, maybe they can give you some advice on other majors that are related, or other less competitive programs that you could be considered at. But assuming you're admitted, and now how do you decide? You've got a few different offers. This is where you have to remember about going back to the fit. okay, you've been admitted. Can you afford to go there? What are the funding opportunities? Are there fellowships that you could be nominated for? Is there an assistantship available? Do you like the location of this graduate program? Can you afford to live there? Many times students will make this transition into graduate studies thinking that this will be the next couple of years, but this is a transition that really changes their lives, and that becomes the place where they'll put down some roots and be forming partnerships and collaborations with people. So you have to think about, could I be here? Could I see myself being here multiple years down the line? Talk to other students, talk to graduates, faculty, your own contacts that you have about what they think of these institutions you've been admitted to. Consider the rankings, the reputation, the research that they're doing, and even find out what you can about what's going on with this department in the future. Perhaps you had your mind set on working with a certain faculty member, and then you find out that that person's going on leave for a year, or sometimes graduate programs will come and go. Find out how stable that graduate program is. Now, I've referred a few times to gathering more information. Really, I think all of you can get this type of information in many different ways, but the Graduate School does have a website which lists graduate programs from A to Z, and you'll see these little buttons down at the bottom. The one that we've got selected here, it says Program Statistics. That's where you can get that data going back for 10 years on different graduate programs, on how many students have applied and been admitted. You can also easily connect through this page to that director of graduate studies or the staff within the department that really would be one of your first contacts as far as an email or phone call to start the conversation going, finding out how many degrees have been awarded from that department. I think we've reached about the end of our slides here.
Yeah, so, thank you for joining us. And at this time, we'll leave some time to entertain questions.
Okay, hi. So we have some questions that are more specific to the MBA program and in general about graduate programs as well. So I'll first start with a question that's related to years of experience. So one of the questions states that it seems to me that many grad students are several years older than graduating undergrads. Would it be a benefit to get some work experience under my belt before applying? And I think this will apply for a lot of the questions out there, but it does oftentimes depend on the program that you're looking at. So for an MBA program specifically, it is much more common for students to have some work experience, relevant professional experiences prior to applying to the MBA program. And we find that students who are coming into the program with some more awareness of what that experience may look like, and then apply that learning from the field and into their MBA studies, they have a much richer experience. It also helps a lot when you have a better understanding of what it is that you may want to do with your MBA. So we do typically see about 4 to 5 years of full-time work experience as the average for most MBA students. We also find that that is a little bit more of the sweet spot as well for a lot of employers who are looking to hire MBA graduates. But that is not, of course, the rule. So there are many exceptions to that. And we also find that a lot of times candidates are looking at the MBA degree as a way to really pivot or transition their careers. So we've had students who've come into the program with very non-traditional experiences or even no work experience before and have been quite successful in the program. So it comes down to a little bit of an evaluation on what is it that you're currently doing, what are the skills that you have developed currently, how does that then translate into what it is that you want to do after graduation, and how does the MBA program help you get there? When you start thinking about it from those perspectives and trying to connect the dot between those 3 points, I think oftentimes it can help you determine whether or not work experience is going to be valuable in an application, or are there other aspects of your application that will make you competitive for admissions into a program.
Going back to an earlier question we had too about undergraduates from the University of Minnesota going into graduate programs, and really there's this is field specific. As Lynn was mentioning, there are certain scholarships available for U of M students to come into MBA programs. And in other situations, I don't think any department would really tell you that they would never admit a University of Minnesota student. But we do know that in some cases, in certain research fields, it can be rare. And part of the explanation for this is they would encourage their undergraduates to take that step outside of the University of Minnesota, because departments have certain cultures and ways of teaching that can be different, and so they like to bring in students from other institutions to expand that way of learning and have our students going off into the world to join other departments. But I don't think anyone would tell you that we would never consider admitting our University of Minnesota student. And what I'm talking about here, that is really pretty rare. We do see many University of Minnesota undergraduate students going into our graduate programs. There was another question about a gap year and deferring admission. It is actually written in the university policy that based on the department's approval, if you've applied for admission and been admitted, you do have the option of deferring for 1 year. Again, the department has to say that's okay, but you would be able to defer your enrollment for 1 year and not have to submit a new application or pay a new application fee. So yeah, that will often be an option for students, and we do have a lot of students that will defer their enrollment.
So there was a question. I'm going to jump to a question earlier too. So I know that there was a question about dual degree programs, specifically with the MBA program. But the University of Minnesota does offer a lot of dual degree or joint degree programs across master's and PhD programs. So it's worthwhile just to explore within the University of Minnesota what some of those opportunities are. With the MBA program, we currently have 8 dual degree programs across different colleges at the university. So we have an MD MBA, PharmD MBA. We also have a Health Administration, MHA MBA, along with an MPP, so Public Policy, JD as well, another joint degree with our Human Resources and Industrial Relations program within the Carlson School. We also have one with the Business Analytics program, so the MS, Masters of Science in Business Analytics and MBA. We also have another one that's relatively new with the College of Food and Natural Sciences, I believe, so CFANS, and that's with Applied Economics and an MBA. I think this is something that we're exploring, just looking at what are some of the more relevant and desired dual degree programs, what are the students desiring, but then also from an employment standpoint, what are the organizations desiring as a skill set, and whether there are natural pairings within the degree offerings across the university to offer dual degrees. And there are opportunities for students to learn more and explore whether or not there is going to be a new offering, or if you're interested, many students can also take their elective coursework outside of their enrolling college. So again, this may vary from program to program, the number of credits that you're able to do so, but that might be an opportunity if you're looking at adding in some other elements from a different degree program into your current program of study. So in terms of what does a graduate applicant do if they need an academic recommendation but have been out of school for several years? And again, this is going to be dependent on the program. One of the things that we recommend is just thinking about, well, what is it about your application? So when you look at your application, it's really limited real estate. So what is it that you're trying to represent within your application? And when you think about it from a reference or recommendation standpoint, how do they fill in some of those other elements of your application portfolio so you can present your best foot forward in your application? So if you're unable to reach an academic advisor, a faculty member, think of mentors, student organizations, student club leadership, in which you may be able to pull in some additional references or recommendations for your application. Again, most programs will vary where they may have some leeway in the types of recommendations that you can submit for your application. For professional programs of study, such as an MBA program, we typically prefer more professional recommendations. And the sticking point here would be candidates who are unable to submit in a recommendation from their current supervisor because they don't want to hint at potentially leaving their job. Are they able to utilize other professional references? And again, we typically have some leeway and understanding of that. So at any point, you can always ask the program what would be the next best step if you're unable to secure the ideal recommendation for your application. Okay, so another question that we have is, are there a lot of recent graduates who are feeling aimless and unsure about their future? What do you say to people who are considering grad school because they aren't sure what else to do? Yes, I think a lot of us who work in admissions will oftentimes feel like we are advising and counseling from a whole life perspective. And I think that especially given some of the changes in our economic climate, things that are going on socially, there's a lot of motivations for why candidates may be considering graduate programs. And we do interact with a lot of students who oftentimes just really don't necessarily know what it is that they want to do. Very rarely do I find students who actually have a perfect and crystallized idea of what it is that they're going to do 5 or 10 years out. Many times people come in saying that, gosh, I just really don't know what I want to do when I grow up. But here are some of the things that I do like about either my current job or this area of study. So oftentimes we'll sit down and we do have advisors working within our offices that can actually work with a candidate and help unpack some of those motivations for why a program could be a good fit and help you determine, is this really the right place for me? Some of the things that you can start doing now is really talking to some students or alumni of those graduate programs that you're considering, just to get a better sense of where were they at. Did they have also the same sense of frustration or excitement, whatever that may be for motivating their next step in their academic professional careers? Talk a little bit more about what their path and their journey looked like and where did that bring them and how did that program help them provide a better sense of direction. Those are some ways just to get started now, and I think one of the best benefits of being a University of Minnesota alumni is that you do have a great alumni network to tap into. So this is a great resource for you just to really utilize as you start exploring some of these things. And there are ways for us to connect you with your own peer network here at the university.
We have another question asking about getting a master's or a PhD and a degree unrelated to my undergraduate degree, and completing prerequisites, and would we want to complete a second undergraduate degree? That probably is very program specific, and it's the type of question that you'd want to direct to that director of graduate studies or the staff person within that department that I mentioned. But I think in many cases they would tell you that you need to complete the prerequisite courses, and that perhaps completing a second degree wouldn't really be necessary. And certainly the minimum requirement for admission consideration is a bachelor's degree, but not specifically a bachelor's degree in that field. So that is a program-specific question. Reach out to your departments, but in many cases, what you need to do is just complete the prerequisite courses. There was another question about study abroad as well. Many of you are so familiar with the University of Minnesota, and you're aware of the global reputation that we have. But there's also these collaborations around the world that faculty members have and are working, especially at one-on-one with their students at the graduate level, where they'll arrange research that they're doing abroad. I mean, I'm thinking of a student right now who was in India for 3 weeks over the winter break and now is in Israel doing research over the summer, and then they'll come back for the fall and begin again in their regular coursework.
So we have a candidate or somebody who's listening in, just asking for clarification on the question related to graduate programs that are similar to their undergraduate degree. And from an employer perspective, so how would employers look at a candidate who has the same graduate degree, graduating institution as their undergraduate degree? What we have found within our MBA program is that there really is no meaningful difference. We find that what really translates more, and this goes back to one of our previous slides, when employers are looking at candidates and how are they differentiated, some of the most leading indicators oftentimes based on your skills. So the industry that you're coming in, the skill sets that you have, your function, and then the actual degree itself. So what are you gaining from the degree from a skill set perspective? So for our students who are graduating, what we found was that this did not make a difference as they're looking at employment options. I think one of the benefit of a program like ours at the University of Minnesota is that we do offer a pretty transformative experience that offers students some real strong experiential learning opportunities. So many of our students are actually working on project-based work with real area organizations that are fee-based, even prior to seeking employment after graduation. So they start this in year 1 of their MBA program studies, and it gives them really meaningful experiences that they are able to take with them into their interviews for their internships or for their jobs after graduation. And oftentimes that translates a lot more than even just what's written down on your paper and your resume. And I think, again, this also will go into some research that you need to do and what are some of the expectations. This may be accurate for an MBA program placement opportunity after graduation, that there may not be much of a difference between your graduate and undergraduate institution. But some other places may have a little bit more of an expectation for broader exposure, broader experiences, maybe global experiences. So it's worthwhile to look into what are some of those expectations from an employment standpoint, depending on the function and the industry that you're looking at.
Well, this is John Ruzek, and I just want to say thank you to Niru and Jim and Lynn for sharing their time about all things graduate school. Obviously, we covered a lot of ground today, and I did send out through the chat function some of the additional link where you can find some more information about these graduate programs. If for some reason you're unable to find the links you're looking for, feel free to shoot me an email from the webinar reminder, and can definitely get you connected into the resources that you're looking for. And so that concludes today's webinar. We appreciate everyone for joining us, and thank you for our Alumni Association members who make this series possible and help enrich the lives of alumni, support student success, and make a better University of Minnesota. So thanks again to our presenters today, and the Graduate School and the Carlson School of Management and OED, and hope you all have a wonderful day.